This video will focus on the career of Floyd Mayweather Jr. Now, a lot of people do not like the fact that Floyd calls himself the best ever. So I just want to go back in time and look at some of the greats and show that Floyd's career is no different than theirs was. I'm not arguing that Floyd is the greatest of all time in this video, but I am saying that he is one of the best and he deserves to be in the discussion of who the best is. I will say it again. I am not arguing that Floyd is the greatest of all time in this video, but I'm saying that he is one of the best and deserves to be in the discussion of who the best is. There's enough people out there that can argue the fact that Floyd is the best if they choose to, and you can argue that somebody else is the best, Sugar Ray Robinson, Ali, or whoever it may be. That's fine with me. But as long as you make sure you consider him and put him in the argument, because he's earned it. He has earned the right to claim to be the best ever. And I'm going to try to show that. I will start with a boxer from the late 1800s to the early 1900s by the name of Galveston Giant, which was his nickname at the time. And his name was John Arthur Johnson. Now, we know him today as Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion. Now, most people today that have even heard of Jack Johnson think that he was just some big guy that was like a knockout artist. And that is really far from the truth. That's not who he was. You see, Jack Johnson, he lost one of his early fights to this fighter named Joe Choinsky or something like that. Prize fighting, as boxing was called back then, was actually against the law in the state of Texas where they fought. So Johnson and this guy Choinsky, they were arrested after the fight. Now, they also together spent like a month in jail together, where Choinsky, like, he gave Johnson some defensive fighting tips. You know, he told Johnson that Johnson moved too good to ever be hit. Well, Floyd today believes in hitting and not getting hit, and he gets criticized for it. But this is what the art of boxing always was about: hitting and not getting hit. The great Willie Pep. I mean, I love watching Willie Pep's fights, and Willie Pep won a round without even throwing a punch because he made the other guy miss so much. Now, if he was fighting on HBO today, he would have never won that round, considering how Jim Lampley and Larry Merchant try to tell us that fight should go. You know, they act like a fighter today is supposed to just be like Rock'em Sock'em Robot. Come to the middle of the ring, be flat-footed, and just swing for the fences. That's not boxing. It's never been boxing. And those guys should be ashamed of themselves because they know the sport of boxing. They've been in it for long enough to know what the sport of boxing is about. And that was just garbage, how they criticize Floyd for the way he fights, when this is the history of boxing. He's not doing anything new. This is the history of boxing. There is nobody, and I mean this, nobody in the sport of boxing that trains a fighter to be flat-footed. Nobody. You train flat-footed fighters to get on their toes and to have movement, to be able to move. That's what the sport of boxing is about. And Floyd has movement. Nobody trains anybody to be a flat-footed fighter. When you have a flat-footed fighter, they're at a disadvantage, because when they fight somebody that can move, they're going to get hit and not be able to land punches. You know, and then because they have this liability of not being able to move well, not having any defense, and being flat-footed, they try to make it seem like it's about being tough. And, you know, no, it's not about being tough, because if you could move and not get hit, you wouldn't get hit. Nobody likes getting hit, but because you have no choice in it, you've gotten used to it. I'm not going to name fighters, but there's plenty of fighters today that are like that. They make it seem like it's a tough thing, that they like getting hit or they want to get hit. That's not true. You get hit because you get hit. You can't stop them from hitting you. So you have to deal with that. And that's why you fight that way. So, but anyway, now I know all you Floyd haters would not have liked Jack Johnson. I'm going to go back to Jack Johnson, because Johnson was a defensive fighter. And this guy, Chonsky, taught him, you know, defensive fighting tips, and showed him how to fight without being hit and how to use his movement in fights. Jack Johnson would defensively fight his opponents, and he would tire them out. He'd become like more aggressive as the rounds like went on. But that's exactly how Floyd fights today. Floyd wears down guys and breaks them down, and he beats them handily, and that's what Jack Johnson did in his time. Johnson was also like a great counterpuncher. He knew how to he knew how to smother punches. Um, he knew how to punish his opponents round after round, and he wouldn't even go for the knockout. He just wanted to punish his opponents round after round, and he was highly criticized for that in his day. Of course, they hated him because he was a black man that was very arrogant and things like that. But these are some of the criticisms that they gave him, and he's no different than Floyd is today. The style of fighting he had. Johnson would like play with his opponents, and he would beat them effortlessly. Just like Floyd. But the media would criticize him and even go as far as saying that he fought like a coward. Wow, doesn't that sound familiar? People call him Floyd a coward. Johnson was hated for his flaunting of money, his arrogance, and because he was a black man in the Jim Crow South days that married white women. And he flashed it. He wasn't hiding it. He wasn't afraid to do what he was doing. No different than Floyd's lifestyle with the flashy cars and all that, throwing money on all kinds of same thing Jack Johnson did in his day. They were constantly looking for the fighter that could beat Jack Johnson in his day. That's where you get the whole great white hype or hope from, and I'm not going to get into that because a lot of people know about that story, but that's where it comes from because they wanted so badly to beat Jack Johnson. And just like today, Floyd beats a guy and they bring up another guy and say he can't fight him, he's scared of him, and then Floyd beats him and they go for the next guy. It's what they did with Jack Johnson in his day and time. He was hated so bad that after him, they refused to let another black man become heavyweight champion again. In fact, it actually took 25 years before there would be another black heavyweight champ. And that champion was a fighter from Alabama by the name of Joseph Barrow. But we know him today as Joe Louis. Now, Louis was totally opposite from Jack Johnson. He had to be actually in order to become heavyweight champion, or they would have never given him a chance because they did not want another Jack Johnson. They gave Louis a set of rules actually that he had to go by in order to be accepted, to even challenge for the heavyweight title or get a title shot or even be considered. He could not be seen alone in a picture with any white woman in his time. He was not allowed to celebrate over a fallen white fighter if he knocked him down or knocked him out. And so on and so on. They gave him these rules and he had to follow by it, in his time. And he did them. So he was not exactly like Jack Johnson and not exactly like Floyd. So you might say, well, how does Floyd compare to Joe Louis? Well, Louis was highly criticized in his day for being a cherry picker, just like Floyd is today. Yes, believe it or not, you've probably never heard that. Joe Louis was considered a cherry picker in his day. Louis defended his title 12 times in 29 months, right? And the media at that time nicknamed his opponents the Bum of the Month Club. That's what they called Louis's opponents in those 29 months, the Bum of the Month Club. They said this even though 5 of the 12 fighters that he fought in those 12 months were ranked in the top 10 when they fought Louis. Same thing Floyd, that has happened in Floyd's career, and I'm going to prove that later on in this video. Now, I'm going to go on to the next fighter I want to talk about. The next fighter I'll compare, he grew up actually idolizing Joe Louis. He was a fighter from Michigan by the name of Walker Smith Jr. But, of course, we know him today as Sugar Ray Robinson. Now, if I give you all the comparisons between Sugar Ray Robinson and Floyd Mayweather, this would be like a 10-hour video. It's just so many comparisons. And if you don't believe me, there are all kinds of documentaries on Robinson that you can see for yourself right here on YouTube. And you'll see for yourself how much he and Floyd was similar inside and out of the ring. As far as the speed, the defensive, he had more power than Floyd, yeah. But the speed and the defensive fighting and the flamboyant, the flashiness, the arrogance, he controlled his own career. He fought when he wanted to, and he fought who he wanted to. And he was a star outside of boxing. I mean, all those things can be said about Floyd today, and is said about Floyd today. And it's true about Floyd, but they were also true about Sugar Ray Robinson. He had issues with domestic violence with his wife, and I'm not saying Floyd. What we saw those issues with Floyd and his ex-wife, but I'm not saying he actually did that. But it's a proven fact that Sugar Ray Robinson, his kids even verified that yes, he did beat their mother, whatever. But that's not the main comparison. There's many other comparisons, but go check it out. Now I'm gonna move on. The next fighter idolized Robinson when he was growing up in Kentucky. We know him as Muhammad Ali.